Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Guns Explained. I'm your host, Cameron Porter. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a bit of a special episode. It's not going to be like the previous episodes where we invited a subject matter expert to come and educate us. This time, we've compiled some information to answer a very specific question, and we want to deliver it to you straight as can be. So, the question we'll be answering in this episode is, does an assault weapons ban make sense? Now, in order to understand this, you really need to have seen the first 3 episodes because we cover some information that is essential to understand if you're going to have a productive discussion about an assault weapons ban. So if you haven't seen those episodes, I would highly recommend you head back, watch those episodes, and then come back to this video and you can learn about this. So before we get into this, I want to throw a shout out to our sponsors, a thank you to Robin Hood Studios for sponsoring this episode. Robin Hood Studios is a Salt Lake City, Utah-based video production company that specializes in corporate videos, promo videos, marketing videos, and advertisements. So if you need any of those things, check over at www.rhsvideos.com and see some of their work. All right, so let's get into this. The question, does an assault weapons ban make sense? Now, this is actually a very sore spot for a lot of pro-gun individuals, and we'll explain why later, but honestly, it's a question that makes a lot of sense to someone who isn't familiar with firearms. And so that's why we wanted to cover this, because it comes up a lot in American politics, but it's a question that there's not a lot of great, correct, consolidated information about. So, to understand an assault weapons ban, we first need to understand the definition of the term assault weapon. And this is where it gets difficult because assault weapon is actually a fairly vague term. There's not a specific definition, an ironclad definition of an assault weapon. Okay, so historically, or the way that the media and the way that politicians have used the phrase assault weapon is to mean any weapon that resembles a military-style weapon. For example, I have right here a Smith & Wesson M&P 14 Sport 2. This would be considered an assault weapon, even though it doesn't have the capabilities of an assault rifle. Now, those are 2 very different terms, meaning 2 very different things. Assault rifle specifically means a weapon that is capable of fully automatic firing. Now, this can come in several forms. They could be select fire, where you can toggle on the firearm itself. You can toggle between semi-automatic and fully automatic modes. This could be burst firing, where you hold down the trigger and 3 or 4 rounds instead of just 1 round comes out. Or it could be just fully automatic, and that's what it is, with no other options. Now, that is part of the definition of an assault rifle. However, an assault weapon is something that does not necessarily need to have any fully automatic capabilities, which means that they are functionally equivalent to virtually every modern firearm in terms of their capacity to fire off rounds in a rapid manner. Now, James B. Jacobs, he is actually a proponent of stricter gun control laws, and he wrote an essay that was published in the Cardozo Law Journal, or Law Review, excuse me, in the Cardozo Law Review, in which he states the following: "The fact that so-called assault weapons are not automatic fire weapons has been widely available for decades. I also find it surprising that gun control proponents continue to expend political capital trying to prohibit a vaguely defined species of semi-automatic firearms that resemble military weapons but are functionally equivalent to other semi-automatic weapons, and which hardly figure at all in violent crime and infrequently in incidents of mass murders." And he is completely right, by the way. According to FBI statistics from the year 2015, of the 13,395 murders committed in the U.S., 2% of them were committed with any type of rifle. That is a rifle like this, or a hunting rifle, or a long rifle, or any kind of rifle, all combined. They only accounted for 2% of the murders. And this is opposed to 48% of the total murders in the U.S. which were committed by handguns. So, assault weapons ban, compared to other priorities, may not be that high. That being said, just because it's a small part of the problem doesn't mean that it shouldn't be solved, but we have to take a look into the logistics of how that might be carried out. And thankfully, we have an example. In 1994, there was an assault weapons ban that was passed in America that made some changes. Now, in that weapons ban, because assault weapon, again, doesn't really mean anything specific, they had to throw in some things, throw in some qualifications to what would be considered an assault weapon. Now, a couple of these things are, for example, a pistol grip, which this one does have. This is called a pistol grip. Now, if a firearm, if a rifle had both a pistol grip and a bayonet mount, which this one does not have, but we all know what bayonets are, I hope, if it had both of those, it would be considered an assault weapon. If it only had one or neither, then it's fine. It does not. It would not be considered an assault weapon. The issue with things like that is that neither the pistol grip nor the bayonet mount really impact the lethal capacity of the firearm. Neither of them really enable you to fire faster. They don't enable you to fire more accurately. It's more of a convenience thing. It's more of a preference thing. It doesn't affect the usability of the firearm. So it was very, dare I say, useless of a ban, and it was very easy to circumvent. The only thing that the 1994 ban did that might be considered effective potentially is they did limit high-capacity magazines. That is, however, a totally different topic for a totally different episode because we're focusing on specifically assault weapons ban for this one. So, this is one of the reasons why education is so important. Because, yes, to someone who's not familiar with firearms, who doesn't know the law, they see this and they could be afraid that it's fully automatic, that it's capable of firing 800 rounds a minute. When in reality, if you walk into any gun store, even if you have a squeaky clean background check and you've never even gotten a parking ticket, there is no way you could walk out of that store with a fully automatic weapon. If you're going to get a fully automatic weapon, because it's been so strictly regulated since 1936, it could be 6 months to a year of intensive federal background checks, as well as interviews and questions as to why you want an automatic weapon before you can obtain one. That's how strictly regulated it is. When you walk into a gun store and you see things like this, none of them are fully automatic. They are all semi-automatic, which means they are functionally equivalent to every other modern firearm out there. And that's why education matters so much. That's why we're doing this channel. That's why we're promulgating this information, because you can't have a rational discussion when fear is dominating and knowledge is lacking. So just by understanding that when you see somebody at the gun range, if you happen to be at a gun range, or if you walk into a gun store and you see these types of guns on display, you know that they're not capable of fully automatic firing because you know the law. And that reduces fear quite a bit. And that's a really important thing. So, how to reduce gun violence in America, not only gun violence, but violent crime in general, is an important conversation. And honestly, in my experience, people on both sides of this issue are very willing to have that conversation. But we can't have it unless everybody is working off of correct information. So regardless of which side of the gun debate you are on, if you're passionate about it, I would exhort you to educate yourself. Focus on learning as much about the laws that are already in place, how firearms work, and the effects that gun control policies have had in other areas so that you know what will work and what won't, or at least have a better perspective on it. So a good step in doing that is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because every week we will be bringing you a new episode that discusses something about guns and focuses on education. We're not looking to change anybody's minds. All we want to do is educate. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We'll catch you next week. Again, I'm your host, Cameron Porter, and we'll see you later.